Welcome back to another naval news segment. Today we're going to focus on Russia's military buildup on the eastern border of Ukraine. This all began back in 2014, just to give you some context, where Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula and part of eastern Ukraine, this little part right here where you see these units, and held that territory since then over the last 7 years. During that time, there's been a lot of small skirmish firefights between the Ukraine army, some Ukraine militias as well, citizen soldiers, and Russia has been supplying Russian rebels, is what Ukraine calls them, with arms. And just recently, in 2021, the Ukraine military began using Turkish-built drones against Russian vehicles in this area here. And that is an escalation that prompted Russia to increase their footprint over the past 12 months or so. So today we're going to be talking about the Russian buildup and what it means. But this is where we begin in 2020 with 28 Battalion Tactical Groups separated into under 3 commands here. And then they have a large force in the Crimean Peninsula here as well, including 2 of the Rapuchka landing support craft, so they can do an amphibious landing with a large number of troops with just 2 of those rather large ships anywhere along the southern coast of Ukraine. So keep that in mind as we go forward here. So let's move on to the meat and potatoes of this. This is brought to us by CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies. This is a very well-respected think tank in Washington. This piece is written by Seth G. Jones, Michelle McCander, and Mr. Joseph S. Bermudez Jr. They did a fantastic job summing up this buildup. So I'm going to read from their commentary piece, dateline November 17th, 2021, so a couple weeks ago. But keep in mind, this has been going on for 7 years. Russia is continuing to slow but steady military buildup near its border with Ukraine. As new CSIS satellite imagery analysis shows, there's been recently a 17% increase in the number of military structures used for storage and billeting troops outside the Russian town of Yelnya, home of the 144th Guard Motorized Rifle Battalion. And then we're going to take a look at Figure 1. This is what they're talking about. This is one of the areas that's beginning to see a large buildup. And if we zoom in on this, we can see all the little tents for personnel. We can see the support vehicles here for these personnel, whether it be generators or whatnot. Cafeterias. Let me zoom out a little bit. Over here on this side, you can see more tents. And up here, we should be able to see some vehicles. Okay, this is, here we go. We got some vehicles here and storage facilities. This is a fantastic high-resolution satellite photo. You don't normally get to see things like this, but this is a large amount of personnel, and you can see just from the tire tracks alone that they have had a large number of vehicles in this area. Let's go back to the piece, though, and read why this is important. And this is just one of many camps, by the way. This is not the entire thing by a long shot. Okay, back to the piece. They write, Russia's buildup comes on the heels of a spike in hostilities between Ukraine and Russian-backed rebels. Following the recent Ukraine strike against rebels using Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 armed drones, for example, Russia scrambled fighter jets to deploy additional tanks to the Ukraine border. Unlike the Russian troop buildup in the spring of 2021, however, the current Russian military buildup is not tied to a military exercise and is therefore causing concern in Washington and some European capitals. So, one of 2 things are going to happen next year. I think, this is my opinion now. They're either going to do one of the largest military exercises in recent Russian history right off the coast of Ukraine, or this is a buildup for invasion. And most people think that it's a buildup for invasion because that's certainly what it looks like. Back to the piece. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg urged Russia on November 15th against taking any aggressive actions in Ukraine. We see an unusual concentration of troops, and we know that Russia has been willing to use these types of military capabilities before to conduct aggressive actions against Ukraine. He's referring back to the annexation of Crimea and the fighting that's gone on since then. In a sign of how serious the United States is taking the threat, President Joseph Biden has also dispatched CIA Director Bill Burns to Moscow to warn the Kremlin that Washington is carefully watching the actions on the Ukraine border. Hopefully diplomacy actions like that will be enough to deter a spring invasion of Ukraine. Again, I don't think it will be enough. Okay, back to the piece. Russia's growing military footprint, consisting of nearly 100,000 Russian soldiers, comprises a range of offensive weapons. Examples include the T-80U main battle tank and the 2 Su Gavzda and 2 S-19 Masta self-propelled howitzers, infantry fighting vehicles, BM-21s, multiple launch rockets, MLRS, and so forth. This just goes on. They're all garrisoned about 160 miles north of the border. All right, so here is another camp. This is elements of the 41st Combined Arms Army. And we will zoom in on this. Here we go. This is where we're seeing the actual vehicles. And you can see, obviously, these are trucks right here. These are armored personnel carriers. All these armored personnel carriers. I'm looking for tanks. These are all trucks right here. And these look like BMPs or BM-21s. The modern version of the BMP. Yeah. So, and fuel trucks too. So they're planning on going for a long drive, which could probably be south. Here, the annotation says approximately 350 tanks, self-propelled howitzers, towed artillery, MRLS, SAMs, and SRBMs, and support vehicles are present. So people that have looked closer at this image than I just did see that there are approximately 390 tanks in and amongst these vehicles, which is nuts. So they are certainly prepared for an invasion. The question is, what is Putin actually going to do in the spring? Back to the piece, they write, despite Moscow's military flexing, it is unclear whether Russia is preparing for a conventional blitzkrieg operation into eastern Ukraine in the near future. Russia's main actions in Ukraine to date have largely involved irregular warfare, such as clandestine support to rebels, offensive cyber operations, and heavy emphasis on special operations and intelligence units, not conventional warfare. Russia's 2014 annexation of Crimea was a textbook demonstration of what Chinese general and military strategist Sun Tzu called the acme of skill, to subdue the enemy without fighting. They literally rolled into Crimea and said, we're here now. What are you going to do about it? And there was, like I said, skirmish fighting for a little while. Things cooled down, and it's kind of simmered like that for the past 7 years. And here we are today, now with this buildup, sparked in part by the use of Turkish suicide drones on vehicles used by the Ukraine military. Russia really sees that as an escalation. Later this year, Russian intelligence and special operation forces stoked a wave of popular unrest and then war in the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine. 6 different Spetsnaz brigades were involved in Ukraine operation in its early stages. Russian special forces, or Little Green Men, as they're subsequently called due to their unmarked green army uniforms, provided training, weapons, and money and other assistance to rebels. So there is a contingency of Ukraine people, I don't know if they're citizens, that, think that they're Russian. They want Russia to, control the territory. And so they are rebelling already in eastern Ukraine. And Russia is supporting them with, weapons and money. Russian subversion in the Ukraine has continued to this day. Moscow has been systematically fomenting political unrest on Donbass by increasing arms shipments to the Russian-backed rebels in the region, according to a recent study funded by the European Union and the German Federal Foreign Office. Such efforts have led to an increase in fighting between the Ukraine forces and Russian-backed separatists, part of the protracted frozen conflict that has persisted over the last 7 years. In addition, Russian President Vladimir Putin has long stated his views that Ukraine is inseparable from Russia. So this really rings of an annexation of Germany and Austria in the late 1930s, I think it was, before World War II really kicked off. Germany was annexing territories that, were historically part of Germany, and they wanted them back. And historically, Ukraine has been, part of Russia historically. And so they want to go back to those days. And clearly part of Ukraine does not, maybe a majority of it. But there are separatists in Ukraine that want to return to being part of Russia, apparently. Yeah, it's really interesting. Here's another photo from the 41st Combined Field Army. Again, this one's near Yelna, Russia. Let's see if we can see more vehicles. So here we have Combined Field Army. These look like, what are these? Oh, there's just more armored personnel carriers, and you can see those are trucks right there. Look at the ratio. It's almost 2 or 3 to 1 trucks for every BM-21. And I'm sure somewhere in here there are tanks. It's too low res for me to see the tanks. But yeah, they have complete, self-supporting battalions broken up into 3 large groups across Ukraine's eastern border. Let's take another look at 2021. This is as of December 3rd, so just a few days ago. This is the most recent count. This comes from the Washington Post. Full credit to Washington Post for this. They managed to acquire this U.S. intelligence document that is unclassified. Washington Post has a history of publishing unclassified documents, and they've done it again. Fantastic stuff here. Full credit to Washington Post. So as of December 3rd, credit to Sean Harris and Paul Sohn for reporting potentially Russia's planning a massive military offensive against Ukraine involving 175,000 troops. That's how much we've gone from having approximately 100,000 troops a year ago, now 175,000 troops, and this is not part of a war game, not a scheduled war game. Potential for 175,000 Russian troops near Ukraine, evidence of recent artillery, equipment, personnel moves, and planning. And we have more detailed satellite images. This is a new one. I haven't seen this one yet. I'm unable to zoom in on this for you guys. I apologize. But go to the Washington Post and read this free article. It is worth your time. And here you can see the location of the 3 large groups I'm talking about. It clearly preparing for a 3-prong offensive. They could drive all the way to Kiev if they want, especially with Crimea holding the flank here. And like I said, they have amphibious capability in Crimea as of now. So they could do an amphibious invasion anywhere from, Mariupol to Odessa, anywhere along the southern border here. As a distraction, who knows? Let's read a little bit from the piece. Credit to Shane and Paul. As tensions mount between Washington and Moscow over the potential Russian invasion of Ukraine, U.S. intelligence has found the Kremlin is planning a multi-front offensive as soon as early next year involving up to 175,000 troops, according to U.S. officials and an intelligence document obtained by the Washington Post. The Kremlin has been moving troops towards the border with Ukraine while demanding Washington guarantee that Ukraine not join NATO, and that the alliance will refrain from certain military activities in and around Ukraine territory. The crisis has provoked fears of a renewed war on European soil and comes ahead of a planned virtual meeting next week between President Biden and Russian President Putin. So that should be happening this week. So we'll see how that goes. I'll be keeping an eye on that and see if anything comes out for us. I'm sure they're going to talk about this. What's actually said may never be released, but we'll see what they say. So I want to cover this real quick. So this is obviously President Biden and Russian President Putin there. This is credit to Sky News, skynews.com. U.S. President Biden has spoken to Prime Minister Boris Johnson and European leaders to share growing concerns about Russia's behavior toward the Ukraine. So EU and America, and NATO in general, are talking about what are we going to do? What's going to happen? Mr. Biden, Mr. Johnson, France's Emmanuel Macron, Germany's Angela Merkel, and Italia's Mario Draghi all shared concern about Russia's military buildup on Ukraine borders and Russia increasingly harsh rhetoric, the White House said. It comes ahead of the expected video call of Mr. Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday. That's today. Time of this recording, they're supposed to be doing a virtual meeting. Okay. After Mr. Biden's expected to speak with the leaders of France, Italy, and Germany, and the UK, so he'll let them know what went down in the meeting that's happening today. Downing Street said that Mr. Johnson promised a group that the UK would continue to use the economic and diplomatic tools at its disposal to prevent Russian aggression against Ukraine. So if Russia does have a military offensive into eastern Ukraine, we can expect more sanctions, freezing of bank accounts of individual people, not just the government itself, not just the country itself. That's what we've done before with Russia and places like Iran and North Korea. We are able to freeze assets that are held in international banks. So we could see something like that as well. He says the leaders agreed to that recent meetings of the G20 and NATO foreign ministers had had useful forums for discussion on this issue. They emphasized the need to provide a united front in the face of Russian threats and hostility. The leaders call on Russia to de-escalate tensions and reaffirm their staunch support for Ukraine territorial integrity, which goes in the face of what Putin has already said, that Ukraine is inseparable from Russia. So Putin is not buying this. He's not going to agree to this. The question is, how far is he willing to go to make Ukraine part of Russia again? And I think the answer is pretty clear with 175,000 troops. So here's a quick map of the European Union and the European Economic Zone. You notice here that Ukraine is not part of either one of those groups. However, a couple years ago, they did pen an economic agreement between Ukraine and the European Union for trade. So there is a trade agreement, even though they're not part of the EU or the EZ. They're not part of either one of those. But more importantly, they're not part of NATO, and they certainly thought they were going to become part of NATO after the fall of the Soviet Union. They just were never brought in, primarily because of their geographical location. Russia would see this as a dagger faced at the belly of Russia. So for political reasons, we did not make them a part of NATO in the 90s, when we were making countries like Estonia and Latvia part of NATO. Ukraine was left out of that deal. Ukraine also had nuclear weapons in the 90s that were from Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. Now, they gave those weapons back to Russia for safekeeping, and that was implied but never promised. That would give them membership into the NATO, and obviously that never happened. So Ukraine really is left hanging in the lurch here. They have no real defensive treaties with anyone that I'm aware of. They certainly aren't part of the EU or the EZ. And they're looking for friends. And the only thing that they've had recently is they've been able to buy some weapons from Turkey. Some of those suicide drones that they've been using against vehicles recently that is being used as the cause for this escalation here recently. And that's what it looks like. So to wrap this up, I want you to look at this. This is going back to last month. Ukraine denies Russian military buildup on border as defense minister resigns. So part of Ukraine military is delusional. They're in denial. They don't think this is going to happen. They're clearly unprepared to fight back against the over 30 Battalion Tactical Groups that are poised to invade eastern Ukraine early next year. It is going to be a one-sided victory. It'll be over fast if it does happen. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. Leave your comments below. I'll take a look at them and see what you guys think. If you want to add to this conversation, I'd be interested to know in what you think. Is this a big play by Putin, or is he really going to invade Ukraine and annex at least the eastern half of Ukraine back into Russia? All right, we'll see you in the comments. Thanks for watching. Bye.